So today we're going to explore a different area, if I may say. We're going to dive into the business, a world that sometimes maybe from a scientist standpoint, we look in a way that is a bit maybe scary. But I think we're going to have a very nice session with Jean-Baptiste on this. Maybe one thing just before we start with Jean-Baptiste, because we didn't really have time last Wednesday, I mean last day, the last day on Wednesday to go through this. It would be nice if from the different rooms we could have someone who would take the floor and tell us about what they have captured from the discussion they had with the different people in the room. So I don't know if we have someone who would be happy to volunteer. And again, I mean, from the top of your head, if you don't have the notes with you. So for those who were in the room, which was about transparent and inclusive mechanisms of science policy interaction, would someone like to let us know what you remember from the discussion? A couple of key points. I don't have the list of who was in the room, so I'm not going to call anyone.
I mean, I can do it, but I think if somebody wants to volunteer, it would be even more interesting.
Dania, Barbara here. It would be great if you could start, because I can remember one point that I would like to add on, but I cannot really cover the whole discussion. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. Yes, I will be brief. I think it was very rich. It started very naturally. People were really engaged in the discussion. From the back of my mind, I did not have the chance to go back to all the inputs, but I recall there was an important point about the role of women. And still that we are still not there at 100% force, especially towards somehow entering this policy side. So there was a bit of a gender limitation for certain groups, mainly women, to be really leading in that interface. And that was something that could be worked on, mainly to train young scientists, young planners to really be at that interface. And that's something it seems that we don't learn in the current systems we have, and there needs to be like an effort given in that sense. I think that was very interesting to hear, especially that a solution is somehow clear, like let's train the young generation to have some specific courses where they could go out of their science or whatever thematic expertise they are in, and to be at least put in that context where they could be trained to then a bit take part also of that missing part of their role. No, so a scientist would say, I'm really just a scientist and I'm here to do my science, while the policy, the decision maker side just wants to hear the two nice words that would be catchy for his or her speeches, while this role, this conveyor role, was something to be worked at, and there were like solutions defined for that. Yes, there were lots of discussions about the communication barriers. So yeah, the language of science is difficult, and there's no mechanism set and easy to solve that issue, and there needs to be more work done in that sense. The language as well. I think there were some comments on the language barriers.
You mean the language in terms of scientific versus
no, the language itself. So
language itself, okay.
Yeah, the languages as well were a bit of a bottleneck, I guess. That researchers were not very comfortable when they were talking about the uncertainty. So many scientists just pull back of providing inputs because they're not sure of this. They're not 100% sure of the results, and that's clear in science. I mean, you always need to go and refine and so on. But at a certain point, there is a need to overcome, and with the knowledge you have, to move with, to convey some indications towards decision. Yeah, there were some issues on many ways of communicating for scientists. So you could, there is no agreement between scientists toward one indication sometimes for the policymaker. That makes somehow the decision maker side just not to take science as a main input. So there needs to be more coordination between scientists, also to convey like clear indications rather than many ways that decisions can be tackled. So I think that was also something interesting we heard. So there is a need to more coordination among scientists to convey clear messages. Language barrier, different target audience. Yeah, time frames were different. So the scientific, or sometimes also the project lifetime, is different than somehow the policy lifetime, and that makes a bit of uncoordination between what results can be and how they could input on time some policy mechanisms.
Maybe we can move to Barbara. You were actually with me in the group on transparency and accountability, so it might be a nice way to continue on this. Barbara, do you want to let us know? Thanks a lot, Dania.
Yes, sorry, I thought I was in the group with Dania, but then realized that apparently I wasn't. But I must say, from my experience, many of these points are valid. And the one that I wanted to that I remember very much from the transparency discussion was actually adding on that, and a colleague saying that the short-term requests that often are addressed to science by policymakers are very difficult to handle, to give advice within a week, and then feeling it has to be a solid scientific advice. That's very difficult, and it's at times not easy to do and to handle. And I guess the colleague didn't say exactly what all is behind this difficulty, but I'm sure we all imagine that there are various things, like you have to find time to provide the short-term request, but you also have to be able to put together the knowledge so that it's solid enough and understandable for the policymakers to work with. And I guess that's a general problem that we sort of cripple with, how to translate the complex knowledge into something that policymakers can use while not making it too simplistic, etc., etc. Yes. But if someone would like to add to the discussions we had in the transparency group, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. Anyone wants to add something from this group? Okay, so we maybe just quickly move to the group which was in room 3, which was looking at institutional capacity and resources requiring multiple competencies and skills, as well as transdisciplinary understanding. Anyone wants to quickly report on key points? Thanks a lot.
We talked about institutional capacity in terms of authorities, including those leading planning processes, but also of those stakeholders that are required or are ideally a part of that process and have to engage in the process. One of the main barriers we discussed was the obvious lack of funding and manpower in some cases, which could be addressed through partnerships, even across borders, so to kill two birds with one stone. We also talk about sometimes the lack of governance understanding within a government itself, and also in relation to neighboring countries, which can, pose a barrier to communication, who does what, and that could be addressed with strong mandates and accountability within those, among those involved, increasing collaboration inside governments as well. We also talk about a lack of potential experience or culture for engagement in this kind of public processes, but also across borders, a lack of previous experience collaborating with neighboring countries, which again can be addressed, could be addressed through mainly political will and commitment to do so, and also training and more informal forums to start conversations and assist in creating those relationships slowly. And then what else did I have written down? Yeah, we also talked about the lack of preparation of some stakeholder groups that maybe have not traditionally been part of a dialogue like this in decision-making processes. And they don't really know how to start, how to come together, how to create a single voice. And that again could be addressed through a specific focus, funding and training and supporting those groups, bringing them together so they can also be part of that process. And I probably missed something because I had to leave a bit earlier. So anyone else in my group, feel free to join.
Yes, and by the way, the document is, I mean, the documents for the 3 groups are still up. So you can absolutely go and take time to fill in the part in front of your name. I think this is really rich, Andrea and Dania. I think there's a lot that came from this group. So thanks everybody for this feedback. And again, the box is open, so you can still continue fill it in.